Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I really appreciate you being with me. Hey, here we are. The month is half over. I want to encourage you to take advantage of the introduction of my brand new book, Temple to Telos. And look, I've had some fantastic exchanges on YouTube with some futurists who say, no, your premise is entirely wrong. You're arguing that the first century temple had to be standing for the fulfillment of the final three feast days. And they've given every excuse in the world, none of which are valid. What's even more amazing to me is that many of these objections are coming from dispensationalists who believe in a yet future temple. But now all of a sudden, when, as I prove in this book, it was the first century temple that had to be standing for the fulfillment of the final three feast days, all of a sudden, that temple has no relevance whatsoever. We're told, the sacrifices could be offered in a tent that could be put up in just 2 or 3 days. Or, the temple itself is not all that important. It's the sacrifices themselves that are important. Well, 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 4, Solomon said that temple was being built to observe the feast days. That was the reason for the temple. And so, there has been one argumentum ad desperatum after another. Now, I mean, no disrespect whatsoever, okay? I enjoy the exchange. It's always good, iron sharpens iron. So that's okay. Now, don't get caustic. Don't get acerbic. Be respectful. I enjoy good dialogue. So, not one person has even come close to refuting the premise of this book. And believe you me, they would love to be able to. Because you see, if my book is accurate, that first century temple, overseen and administered by the Levitical priests in conformity with the law of Moses in the first century, if that temple had to be standing for the fulfillment of the final three feast days, since it's not standing, then that means the final three feast days are fulfilled or God's promises failed. It's irrelevant, totally irrelevant, that there were short periods of time in Israel's history, i.e. in Egypt, or in the wilderness wandering, or at the return of the Babylonian captivity while they were building the temple. It's totally irrelevant, ladies and gentlemen, that they offered sacrifices without the temple. Has absolutely nothing to do with the subject, because Colossians and Hebrews says that the temple that was standing in the first century, administered by the Levitical priests in conformity with the law of Moses, would stand until the time of fulfillment, i.e. the time of Reformation. I'm sorry, folks, that's game over. Unless you can categorically prove that the temple was not the heart throb, the heartbeat, the very center of Israel's cultic world of the feast days. Unless you can prove that, you have no case whatsoever. So, again, take advantage of the introductory offer, Temple to Telos, a study of the relationship between the first century temple and the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, because for the rest of this month, this is December 2022, U.S. orders only, total delivered price, $12.95. Now look, I've got to tell you how much I appreciate the response to the introduction of this book. I've had now to order inventory 4 separate times. I've never had to do that with the introduction of a brand new book. So yeah, I appreciate it very, very much. And the comments and the feedback that have started coming in are absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. Okay, back to Revelation chapter 6. Yesterday I connected the dots between Isaiah 2 through 4, Luke 23, 28 to 31, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, and Revelation chapter 6. I demonstrated that Isaiah chapter 2 through 4 is unequivocally and undeniably a prediction of the judgment of Israel in the last days, day of the Lord, to avenge the blood of the martyrs. I demonstrated that Jesus applied it in that very way. Luke 23, 28 to 31. I demonstrated that Paul, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, quoted from the very verses that Jesus applied from Isaiah to the impending fall of Jerusalem. Paul quoted from those same verses, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, and in Revelation chapter 6, the angel telling John about the imminent fulfillment for the prayer of the martyrs for vindication and vengeance on their persecutors, and it was coming soon, quotes from the identical verses that Jesus applied to AD 70 that Isaiah 2 through 4 unequivocally applied to AD 70. So you have Isaiah predicting the last days, day of the Lord, in the judgment of Israel and Jerusalem in the last days. You have Jesus applying Isaiah to AD 70. And you've got John quoting from those same identical verses to predict. Now, what's he predicting? What is that angel talking about? Verse 17 of Revelation 6. For the great day of his wrath has come. And who's able to stand? Now, here's something you need to know. Throughout the Tanakh, the Old Testament, we find the term day of wrath. The day of the Lord's wrath, the day of vengeance, the destruction of Babylon, the destruction of Babylon, Jeremiah 50 and 51, was the day of the Lord's wrath. Why? Well, Jeremiah 50, verse 14, by the way, you've really got to catch the power of this text. That judgment on Babylon was because she has sinned against the Lord. Enough said. But that coming destruction of Babylon was called the day of the Lord. It was called the day of the Lord's vengeance. It was called the day of the Lord's wrath. But it's very clearly a historical day of the Lord. The judgment upon Edom, Isaiah chapter 34, as we saw yesterday, it is called the great day of God's wrath. But that was fulfilled in 583 BC when the Babylonians destroyed Edom and Bozrah. The destruction of the 10 northern tribes of Israel is called the coming of the Lord. It is the day of the Lord's wrath. It is the day of the Lord's vengeance. Oh, and it's also the day when the Lord would descend out of heaven, walk on the tops of the mountains, and the mountains and the earth would melt beneath his feet. Micah chapter 1, 2, and following. Do you get the point I'm making here? I'm sure you do. This terminology of the great day of wrath, the day of the Lord's wrath, throughout the Old Testament is invariably a historical day of the Lord. It is never a literal bodily coming of God out of heaven in a visible manifestation of his body. Never. Yet here in Revelation 6, we are being given a promise of the vindication of the martyrs coming very soon, using that Old Testament metaphoric hyperbolic apocalyptic language. Now, here is a hermeneutical question for you. Not only have I been posing the question, if and since Isaiah foretold the last days day of the Lord in judgment of Israel for shedding innocent blood when men could run to the mountains, I know. Sorry about that. It's rust proofing. Working on old cars. It won't come off. Has to grow off. Anyway. So, since Isaiah applies his own prophecy to the last days, day of the Lord, which is not something prior to that, and since Jesus applied Isaiah to AD 70, then since Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 quotes from the very verses that Jesus applied to AD 70, and since John in Revelation is quoting from the exact same precise verses that Isaiah applied to AD 70, that Jesus applied to AD 70, what is the hermeneutical principle for saying, yeah, I know all that's true, but, Revelation has to be something different? We got to have the text. We got to have the context. We've got to have the divorcement of Revelation from all of these previous applications. And here's another hermeneutical question for you. When a New Testament writer quotes verbatim from an Old Testament prophecy that is demonstrably fulfilled, okay, proving that the language is demonstrably figurative, non-literal. So when the New Testament writer quotes the language that is clearly fulfilled, that is clearly metaphoric, upon what basis do we come to the New Testament text and say, well, yeah, I know it was metaphoric back then, I know it was fulfilled back then, but the New Testament writer is applying it literally to something radically different in nature from the way it was used in the Old Testament. Folks, we got to have justification for that kind of application. And there is no justification for that. Okay, out of time for today. I hope you can see the connection of the dots. Now, we're not through in Revelation. Next week, next Monday, we're going to begin looking at this great day of God's wrath in Revelation, this great day of God's wrath, which would be the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 2 through 4, and how it's being applied in Revelation. You certainly don't want to miss that, and you certainly don't want to miss tomorrow as we engage in further discussion, a review and response to Steve Gregg's book, Why Not Full Preterism. Don't want to miss it, so I'll see you on the flip side.